I don't really do the military analysis stuff because it bores me, quite frankly. I mean, I'm not gonna gild the lily in any way. Let me just fix the camera a little bit. It just bores me because I understand enough to know that it's a fast-moving thing. The whole military operations and all the rest of it. It's a fast-moving thing. There are a lot of names to learn, and the marginal utility, it's fairly low. I mean, okay, so I know about some battle and I know all the ins and outs, and so how does this really help me? And so, how does it help me in terms of understanding? And that's the point, of course. It's understanding what's going on. And so what I usually do is I sort of like focus on the military, like general, I'll like go through it, go through the different people who analyze the military situation on the ground, and I'll come to a generalized overview of the situation. I won't know the details of it. I'll know where to find the details if I ever need the details. But I just sort of like followed along, like I just go with the flow in terms of like, oh, it's going in this direction, oh, it's going in that direction. And I listen to people on both sides of the divide, pro-Ukrainian commentators, pro-Russian commentators, anti-Ukrainian commentators, and anti-Russian commentators. They're a different breed, by the way, because there are some people who are pro one side or another, but try to give an objective view. And there are those who are anti one side or another, and they give a completely skewed point of view. But many times those points of view are very interesting because you can get a lot of information out of a lie. A lot of times a lie can express priorities. And so when somebody lies about X, you realize that X is important for them. You don't lie about something that you don't care about. You see what I'm saying? So anyway, I sort of like follow along everything, but without paying too much attention because I don't want to get lost in the weeds. Basically, that's the best metaphor. I don't want to get lost in the weeds. Having said that, it's time to get in the weeds because it looks like we're about to experience something dramatic. Bottom line, quickly, to get to the punchline. In the town of Lysychansk, there is around that town, the Russians have essentially encircled it, and the only road out of the area is under fire control by the Russians. For those of you who don't know, and I didn't know until 3 months ago, fire control means that an opposing army can hit an area with their artillery at will. Okay? And that, of course, makes it that even though they have not captured that territory, it's become lethal for the opposing army, right? So the one road to evacuate the area around the town of Lysychansk, right? When you're looking at it, like it's like this, like an elbow, and here's the south, and here is the east, and it's sort of like right there in the crook of the elbow, if you will, of the whole Donbass offensive on the part of the Russians. Well, it turns out that the Russians have encircled it on three sides, and the fourth side, the only road out, well, it's covered. They've got it covered, and they've got it, not enough coffee here. They've got it covered, and so that basically means that everybody who's around there is essentially going to be either killed or captured. And it's 15,000 men. 15,000 men. There's something else going on too, and I've read this in different accounts that there is a difference of opinion between President Zelensky and Valery Zaluzny, who is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces, because the commander-in-chief and the head of the army, the president, are two separate people in the organization of the Ukrainians. Now, of course, Zelensky is no military man, and this Zaluzny is a general who seems very capable and more or less knows what he's doing. And it seems that they have a difference of opinion, because basically Zelensky is telling, the armed forces, stand and fight and never retreat. Because apparently, from what I understand, the law in Ukraine is that only the commander-in-chief, the president, can order a withdrawal, which seems weird, but okay. I'll just take people's words on it. I mean, if they're saying that that's how it is, that's how it is. And so the point is that, see, all of a sudden, there is like a marked difference of opinion between these two gentlemen. And this difference of opinion where one side wants to stand and fight no matter what, and the other wants to retreat. And so Zelensky wants to stand and fight, Zelensky and, of course, the goons around him, because he's been ordered by Washington to stand and fight. Because the Pentagon is micromanaging this war, of course, because that's how the Americans are. And they're micromanaging this war and telling Zelensky, no, you can still win this somehow. The Lysychansk encirclement. And so basically they came to a compromise. The commanding general wants to withdraw those troops from Lysychansk to a more defensible position. And so they came to a compromise that they're not going to withdraw those troops for at least the next day or two, until Friday. That's the date, according to Russian intelligence. Now, Russian intelligence is probably going to say something that's more or less accurate. The PSYOP value is, well, perhaps there's a lot of PSYOP value, because it basically indicates that there is a break in the leadership between the civilian commander-in-chief and the military commander-in-chief. Be that as it may. The reality is that the Lysychansk encirclement is going to be a catastrophe for Ukraine. A lot of people who are commenting on it, conservative people, people who are on the pro-Ukrainian side, and who, of course, are hoping for the best for the Ukrainian side. They, which would be the conservative view in this case, they are saying that conservatively, a third of those men will be killed. Because in order to withdraw, you have to leave some people who are going to be defending. And so the people defending at Severodonetsk, which is a little town there, it doesn't really matter. It matters, of course, for the people who live there, and I mean no disrespect to them, but in the scheme of things, it doesn't really matter. The point is to understand what's going on. This encirclement of these 15,000 men, in order to withdraw them, you need to have a piece of those men to be defending the exit of the others, of the majority. And the conservative estimate is that you would need 5,000 men, and those 5,000 men will either be killed or captured, so as to allow the rest of the army, 10,000 men, to leave. Now, that's a huge loss, 5,000 men at one go. And that's the best case scenario, okay? And so my thinking is, these 15,000 men, they should surrender. I think it would be inhumane to have potentially a third of those men killed for nothing, And that's the thing that has me so upset on hearing this news. That, of course, I understand how the process happened. There are people in Washington who are saying, oh, you're going to do this, and oh yeah, we'll take 5,000 men as a loss, but those are acceptable losses. Yeah, they're acceptable losses to some guy in Washington, some bureaucrat in Washington, some bloodthirsty witch in Washington. But what about the parents of those men who are killed? The girlfriends, the wives of those men killed, the children of those men killed. Is it acceptable to them? Look, one of the things that's obvious about following this war, even superficially, is that every day the Russians are gaining ground. Not once are the Ukrainians gaining ground, except in that offensive here in Kharkov, which you could say was an offensive, but you could also say, with good reason, that it was really the Russians kind of like, pulling back and regrouping and straightening their line a little bit. Okay? As offensives go, it wasn't really an offensive. In some parts, there was some fighting. Yeah, sure. In some parts, the Ukrainian armed forces attacked and the Russians retreated, yes. But compared to the rest of the war, it's a rout. Everywhere you turn to, every day along the front, the Russians are gaining ground. And it's relentless. And it's, just a few hundred meters here, a few hundred meters there. But, it adds up, And so that's what's going on. And it's just so depressing to see it happening. To see what it represents. This is a losing war for Ukraine. It is. And people don't like that fact, but it's the truth. And Lysychansk, if we're all lucky, if those men are lucky, then the Russians have a breakthrough and the Ukrainian armed forces realize on the ground that they cannot survive this and they just give up on the spot with minimal loss of life. That's the best case scenario. Worst case scenario, half of those men are killed for nothing.